Hello BookTube, I'm Heather, and I thought I would try to get back into the habit of filming videos by doing the 2023 version of the Midyear Book Freakout tag. I'll put the details about the originator of the tag and the questions in the information box down below. So the first question is, what is the best book you read this year? And for me that would be Shirley Hazard's The Transit of Venus. I read this with a group of people organized by Sarah of Hardcover Hearts. And it was my first Shirley Hazard, and Hazard's a wonderful writer. She's complex, her prose is elusive, lots of references, very subtle references often to other bits and pieces of literature. It's kind of narrative point of view catnip for me because the point of view can shift very subtly over the course of a paragraph or a couple of sentences. So Transit of Venus was most definitely my most favorite book so far this year, then probably the best book I've read so far this year. The second question is best sequel I've read this year. I've read relatively few good sequels this year, but at the beginning of the year I went on a bit of a binge of reading some espionage spy novels by Mick Herron, the Slough House series. And I guess the second in that series, The Dead Lions, would be the best series, or best sequel I've read so far in 2023. Since I read them all in a big gulp, so I read like 4 or 5 in a row. It was that kind of month in January for me. And they all blur together. The upside of reading in a big gulp like that is that you get the sense of a sustained story, and you get the pleasure of these novels, which are in many ways parody of John le Carré's novels or homage to John le Carré. They're stories about essentially disgraced MI5 officers who are sent to a branch office where inevitable shenanigans and bad things start to happen, and they need to unfold them or figure them out. The downside of reading a series like that in a one big gulp is that you can start to see its flaws, and its attractiveness can pale as you get to the 4th or 5th one. And that happened for me in the series. By the time I got to the 5th one, I think it was the 5th one, the stereotypes, and in particular some of the ethnic stereotypes that had been used to build characters earlier in the series started to wear a bit thin. But on the whole, it's an amusing series, largely for me because of its parodic references to British political figures. There's a character who's clearly modeled on Boris Johnson, for example. It's quite a venal character, so that was amusing. So the third question is a new release that I haven't gotten to but still want to read. That would be Communists in the Closet, queering the history from 1930s to 1990s. So this is Bettina Aptheker's history. It came out last year from Routledge in 22, and it's an amazingly expensive book because it would have had a small print run and is aimed at an academic audience. So I doubt that this is going to come my way anytime soon. So I still want to read it, but I'm not likely to be able to spend the $50 Canadian for an Amazon Kindle version of the book. But I am curious about this. I'm curious about that aspect of the US Communist Party, about how it shaped itself by excluding and expelling certain types of people that didn't align with its view of itself. In terms of something that I am going to actually be able to read, because I think I'm first in the queue at the library for it, is Janet Malcolm's full title here, Still Pictures on Photograph and Memory. So this is Malcolm's last published book. She died recently, and it's a series of essays about photography and memory. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Fourth question, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Okay, so yesterday or the day before, my local library loaded all of the big name releases for the fall. So they preload all of these titles. They enter the catalog as on order. If you poke around a little bit, you can find them and search on everything that's on order. And yes, some of us might look at that page every couple of days. So I put, 20 novels, I think, on order, on the on order status on my hold list, paused all the holds. And of those 20, the one I'm looking forward to the most is Katharina Vermette's conclusion to her series of novels about Métis women living in Winnipeg. Began in 2017 with The Break, continued in 2021 with The Strangers, and the one that's coming out this fall is The Circle. I'm very much looking forward to that and hope to actually get to read that in September, since I am number one on that list, since I obsessively check what the new books are going to be. There's a second one I'm looking forward to. It's a reprint, though. It's a reprint of Rosemary Tonks' novel. Tonks was a writer in England, published from mid-50s to early 70s, mid-70s, and then had a period of illness and a religious conversion, and then stopped writing for a public audience and did everything she could to destroy her manuscripts and copies of her books in libraries and so on. And New Directions has started republishing her books, and the one I'm looking forward to that's coming out, I think, in October here in Canada is Halt During the Chase. So looking forward to that. Question 5. This is one I struggle with, not because I don't have books that disappoint me. There's always books that disappoint me, but because I usually don't like to talk about them in public. So I'm going to stop being coy about it. So this year I like to read stacks of mysteries just as kind of brain candy, just to not be thinking about really serious things. And a lot of the books I read this year are serious, sad topics. So a little stack of mysteries is a happy place for me usually. And earlier this year I picked up the first 2 novels in 2 historical mysteries, one by Anna Huber and one by Andrea Penrose. I don't remember the titles, and I read the first 2 in each of these series, and I found them disappointing. They have some things in common, which I think explains the disappointment for me. They're historical mysteries. They're set in pre-1830 England, and they deal with female characters with unusual ways of earning their living. And so the difficulty turned out to be that since I know a fair amount about that period, I didn't have much patience with anachronistic language or anachronistic events. I mean, there's a certain amount of disbelief I'm absolutely willing to suspend, but these ones just kept doing things that were beyond the realm of possibility and spoiled the book. And as well, some of the prose was pretty flat and repetitive. So those were duds for me. Question 6, the biggest surprise of the year so far. For me, that would be in The Way Out of Berkeley Square by Rosemary Tonks. This was published in 1970 and it's out of print. You can't find it on Internet Archive. You can occasionally find it for sale on the secondhand market. It costs usually $50 to $60 US if you can find a copy. I borrowed mine from one of the academic libraries here. It was great, and it surprised me in the way it was very much like Beryl Bainbridge in the stripped down prose and the amount of dire things that happen, and it's operating in a similar sort of milieu, a cultural milieu, not an economic milieu. It's the story of Arabella, who's a very naive narrator who's trapped in difficult relationship with her father, frustrating relationship with her brother who's away, and a series of unpleasant encounters with men who are all aggressive sexually with her. But it's stripped down prose, very compressed. There's a little satiric bite to it. It's got lovely portraiture of London in the early 70s, and it's an odd thing, but I particularly enjoy the scenes where she goes shopping for clothing and all the big designer names of the period pop up. The character is born to a fairly wealthy family. So that was the biggest surprise, and it sent me down a path of trying to find and borrow Tonks novels to read. She's the same kind of pleasure that you would get from Beryl Bainbridge but I think actually a much happier writer. Nothing happy ever happens in a Beryl Bainbridge novel, ever. That's why they're so great. Question 7, favorite new author, whether it's debut or new to me, that would be Shirley Hazard. Hazard is a fabulous writer. Question 8, newest fictional crush. Nope, didn't have one this year. Not the kind of thing that pulls me anymore. Newest favorite character. Okay, well, that would probably be a character named Anne, who appears in Beryl Bainbridge's Sweet William, which was published in 1975. And Anne is in a relationship with a man named William, not surprisingly. And the novel is very short, it's under 200 pages, traces the evolution of their relationship from the moment her current partner leaves for America, and then she's picked up by William through the development and dissolution of that relationship, which takes course over, maybe the course of 9 or 10 months. And it's typical Bainbridge prose. It's compressed description of scenery and surroundings, kept to a minimum, but it's there. And the most interesting thing about Anne is that she can both see the details that are telegraphing what's going on with William and the less than ideal things that he's doing, and not able to see them, not able to interpret them. So as the novel goes along, in classic Bainbridge fashion, you start to accumulate all these little clues about the horrific things that are happening now in the background but aren't being observed correctly, and the details about the characters' backstories that are all communicated in a very subtle way. So I quite like Anne. She's both very, very stuck in the way she's moving through the world and observant. And gradually, I think, over the course of the novel, trusts her own observation. Books that made me cry. Oh, this was hard. I didn't cry, and I've read a lot of books that on reflection are quite grim, but I think the one that made me the saddest was Rohinton Mysteries' A Fine Balance. The ending of this novel, which I'm not going to give away, was both devastating and infuriating. It's a story of a cluster of characters who are all quite impoverished and living in India at the time of Indira Gandhi and the sterilization campaigns. It's a devastating book. I was mad at it for a long time, so I didn't cry, but I got mad. I don't know if that really should fit under this category, but no crying, lots of madness. Okay. The other one that made me sad, I suppose, is Jenny Diskey's memoir, Ingratitude, which was published after her death and is made up of 3 parts. The beginning and end part are reworked and augmented sections from the column she posted in the London Review of Books as she was dying. She had a variety of inoperable lung conditions, including a cancer. And the middle section is her account of her relationship with Doris Lessing. Lessing fostered Diskey from the time Diskey was about 15 to 20, maybe. And they had a very difficult, fractured relationship, and Diskey appears in Lessing's novels as a character, as a renamed, redescribed character. And it was sad to read about the reality of what it was like for Diskey to be living with Lessing, who was not always a kind person and not kind to Diskey, and the way that Lessing mined her life. And the story of Lessing's son, Peter, I believe, is also pretty sad. So those are 2 that made me both sad and angry as a substitute for sad. The 11th question is what book made me happy this year? Not many of them. There are many very good books, but sad. Sad. A lot of sad books. It's been that kind of year so far. But I'm going to include some zines in this, and I bought from Heather at Soggy Expat Book Nerd this. Not sure how that's going to show up for you. It's a little zine about her dog, Hank. And Hank and Anne. That made me happy. There's just something about the energy of the zines and the happiness of seeing Hank living his best life as an old dog. That was something that made me happy. Most beautiful book I've bought this year. Well, I think I've bought maybe 10 books this year, maybe 12, and they're all secondhand books that come from a massive twice-a-year book sale that I go to here. And of them, this is probably the most beautiful, and it's nothing to look like on the screen. It's a collection of, I'll show you an interior page, collection of sonnets of a very, very minor maritime poet. It was privately printed, and it's beautiful because it's leather. The leather has been well bound. The book is impeccably preserved, which is a fluke. It's a numbered copy, 324, ragged edge paper. The paper is in remarkably good condition. Usually books of this period, this is like a 1918, 1920 publication, are foxed, lots of brown little spots all over them, and this one is in excellent condition. More seriously, in terms of beautiful books, I did get one as a gift. Oh, let me check on my books. And this one. This is a beautiful book. But it's beautiful because the food photography in it is lovely. As it always is with the Smitten Kitchen thing. So that would be the two most beautiful books I've acquired this year so far. Question 13. What books do I need to finish by the end of the year? Well, all of them and none of them. It's a kind of typical booktuber answer. I have a massive reading list that I was hoping to make significant progress on this year. I'm making progress, but there might be 100 or 200 titles on that list, and I've gotten through maybe a quarter, so 25 of the stuff that's on the reading list, plus all the other things I'm reading. So what I've got to show you are the two books that I'm actually currently reading right now that I do want to finish before the end of the year, ideally before the end of July. This one is After the Death of Don Juan by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I bought this, I think, a year ago, so I want to try and get through it. Warner's one of my favorite writers. She's an early to mid-century, 20th century novelist from England. She's novels, historical novels, contemporary novels, and short stories. She wrote very regularly for The New Yorker. I think The New Yorker was actually her bread and butter money. This one's okay. It's supposed to be her reaction to the Spanish Civil War in fictionalized form, recast into the 18th century? 19th century, and a reaction, I suppose, to Byron and his account of Don Juan. I'm only 50 pages in. I'm not sure what I think of it yet. 50 pages really isn't a lot to go on. And the other one is, it's a book that's in dire condition. It was published in 1941, and this is the second impression of that British publication, and it's this thing. It's from the library, so it has no dust jacket, water stains, sun stains. It's got the typically crappy wartime paper. I'm not going to be able to show you that. It's rough paper, very woody and pulpy. And it's Virginia Woolf's The Death of the Moth. And I've had this checked out from the library for nearly a year, so I need to finish it. I am about, I'm on page 78, I don't have my reading glasses on. And it's a collection of little essays, and I was reading some of these yesterday, and Woolf is such a lovely writer. That's a trite thing to say, I know. But I'm reading, a little essay she wrote about Horace Walpole's letters that were being actively published in new editions when she wrote the little piece in here. And all of a sudden, not only do I want to know everything about Horace Walpole, but I want to go off and read his letters. Can I do that? Yes. Am I likely to? No. But the same thing happened again in a little essay about Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and another one about Sarah Coleridge. So I think that's one of the skills that Woolf has in this very battered copy of The Death of the Moth, is her ability in 3 pages to communicate why you might want to read this book or that book or this series of letters. So I'm very much enjoying this and hoping and planning to get through that before the end of this month, which will be about a year since I borrowed it from the library. This is so battered. This tag needs to have a question about the ugliest book you bought that has the most marvelous content in it, and that would be this. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. So that's the 2023 Mid-Year Book Freakout tag. Much delayed, as is all my BookTube content. It's been a tough year. Nothing dire has happened, but there have been lots of small things happening. You know, something unpleasant happening, getting through the unpleasant thing, recovering from getting through the unpleasant thing, and another unpleasant thing happens. And they're all literally unpleasant and not dire. So it's been an odd reading year and a much odder booktubing year. If you've stuck around this long, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good reading week. Bye-bye.